Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. My name is Jane Atkinson. I'm the author of the Wealthy Speaker 2.0 and the Epic Keynote, and soon to hit the stores, the Wealthy Speaker Daily Success Planner and Journal. I'm super excited about that one because I want to use it for myself. I'm wondering if anybody else has ever designed something for pure selfish reasons. I want to give a huge shout out to the folks who have posted comments and reviews on either our site or iTunes or Stitcher. We hadn't been asking for those, so we could definitely use some help on those fronts. Linda Leclerc, thank you so much. She responded to the Greg Schenkel podcast around hitting $1 million contracts. She said, now that's what I call a great podcast. I really enjoyed listening to this and I've learned a lot. Thank you so much. Loved it. So keep those reviews coming in. The better the ratings, of course, the more we get found by people outside of our network. And I was really thrilled to see how popular the podcast on how to find an agent that I did was on iTunes. So appreciate all the love on that. Now, the topic of today's podcast is moving from event speaker to business partner. Now, I know some of you might say, well, I already do that, but guess what? There might be a tweak that you can make in your process, or simply thinking of yourself as a partner, might just expand your mind on how we might be able to do this. And of course, that's going to lead to more business. Our guest expert today, and I really want to get her name right, is Enette Pauze. Did I say that correct, Enette? Pauze. Oh, I knew I was going to mess it up. So I really appreciate it. I've seen your name in print for a decade now since I met you. And I think I've been getting it wrong in my head this whole time. So Enette Pauze or Z-E. So let me just give everybody a brief overview of Enette, and we'll move into it straight from there. Enette is the CEO of the Level 8 Leadership Institute, a private organization dedicated to inspiring world leaders who leave global legacies. I love that. Enette has worked across multiple industries, both the private, public, and nonprofit sectors, with executives and business families from Canada, US, Mexico, South Africa, United Kingdom, India, and Sri Lanka. She completed her PhD at the University of Toronto, specializing in organizational partnerships. We have the perfect person on the call for this particular topic, and is a designated family enterprise advisor. As a dynamic, trusted advisor, her clients affectionately describe her as the cross between a university professor and camp counselor. Love it. Love it. Your experience runs so deep. So tell us how you landed in this crazy speaking industry of ours over a decade ago.
It's a great question because I think before I met my husband, I didn't even really think that speaking was a profession.
A thing, right?
A thing. I didn't even know it was a thing. I mean, I grew up going to leadership conferences, and so I saw speakers all the time, but it never occurred to me that it could be a profession. And it wasn't actually until Sanjay Nath, who is my husband, and who was a CAPS member before I knew about CAPS, sort of, I think it tricked me into it, is the standing joke that we have in our family. So he really sort of introduced me to the idea that I could even become a professional speaker. At the time, I was much more into academia and academics, and the concept of speaking was speaking at academic conferences. So the speaking itself wasn't new to me, but as a profession and as an expert and using it as a tool to really share a message and to launch a movement, it didn't occur to me really till Sanjay introduced me to CAPS, and then of course going to CAPS and meeting the wonderful people in that family, in that community, opened my eyes to a completely different global horizon about where sort of the speaking industry fits within a larger global conversation.
Oh, wonderful. Now, CAPS, of course, is the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and we also have our sisterhood, the National Speakers Association in the U.S. So any of our listeners who aren't really involved in CAPS or NSA may want to check it out. And I know that everybody really embraced you right out of the get-go, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you be a part of our community. So today we're talking about being an event speaker, some people will just kind of parachute in, do their thing, and then off they go on to the next event. Let's talk about really being a business partner. What do you think the difference is for that?
Well, when people ask me if I'm a professional speaker, I actually, for the most part, depending on the audience, of course, I say no. I'm an expert who speaks professionally versus a professional speaker. And I say that in a humble way. I'm not trying to insult people, but there's a mindset difference for me when I say that I speak professionally, because speaking is a tool. So when somebody invites me to come and speak at an event, I don't see myself as a name in a slot, in a time, in a conference. I see myself as a resource. As a problem solver. And the person who is in front of me, whether it's a meeting planner or a CEO or somebody else that's involved in the event planning process, I don't see them as that title. I see them as a person that has a list of priorities or a list of problems that they need to address, and I'm trying to figure out whether or not I can help. So I think, again, seeing yourself as an event speaker, that's a very practical, check the box, and people understand that. Mm-hmm. But the mindset when you move from being an event speaker to a business partner moves you from very transactional relationships to more transformational relationships, because you start to think and ask different questions, which open up opportunities that wouldn't normally be put on the table for somebody who's just trying to fit in a box in a time slot for an event.
I love it. And you're actually furthering kind of a conversation that I've been having with my clients. I think I'm going to get ready to post a blog about this exact topic, which is just to remind people that speaking is just one of the ways that you distribute your knowledge. When you see yourself, and this is something that I think is kind of a part of our association culture, that my goal is to pop people up out of the speaker mentality to the expert mentality that you're talking about. We're exactly on the same page about that, because when you are seen as an expert, you are someone coming in to solve a problem, and speaking is likely just one of the ways that you can do that. So when you sit next to somebody on the plane, for instance, and they say, "Hi, what do you do?" You might open with how you help people build more transformational relationships rather than "I am a speaker." That's such a different conversation, don't you think?
100%. That's exactly the mind shift that I'm alluding to, because we're in a relationship business, regardless of what you're selling, whether it's product or services, or, a specific type of keynote, or other, different ways that you help people. We're in the business of relationships, and people buy you first. They're interested in who you are, what makes you interesting. Your value that you have to offer has a lot to do with the number of problems and the importance or the value of those problems that you can solve for people. So having a conversation about the expertise that you offer instead of the ways in which you do it puts you on a completely different playing field.
Right. Okay. So let's shift gears to somebody is reaching out to you. And at this point, it's still transactional, because they just want to know, are you available on such and such a date, and what's your fee? Don't you find that's how a lot of conversations start?
Yes. Okay. Absolutely.
So what would your approach be to then moving into that conversation and shifting it from transactional to transformational?
Well, a really great question to ask is, why me and why now? Mm-hmm. I guess that's two questions. But, most of my business, at least by now, comes referral or repeat. So somebody who is contacting me because somebody that they know and trust has said that they should reach out to me. And if they have found me online somewhere, we've already started a relationship because they've read something that I've written, or they've listened to something, a podcast or something that I've done. So we have some kind of relationship anyway. And so can I do the transactional stuff? Yes, I'm available. Yet check the boxes enough that they even want to have the conversation. Absolutely. But once I'm on the phone, I want to understand, why me? What was it about me and what you know about me and what your needs are that made you think that there was a fit? Because I want to start from what their potential and imagination is about why or how we might work together. That's the first place to start.
I like that. And do they ever just say, well, I was just looking for a speaker and I Googled you?
Every once in a while, we
Yeah.
get the transactional,
Okay.
and that's sort of a filter question too. If somebody's not interested in
Yeah.
moving to the transformational question, then just do the transactional. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just
Sure.
mean they want factual information. Are you available? Do you fit within my budget? We've
Right.
already checked you out, and it's actually a quick sale because they already know whether or not they want to buy you. They're just checking out logistics.
Right.
Don't get in your own way. Don't make it more complicated than what it needs to be. Because moving from an event speaker to a business partner doesn't have to happen in the first conversation.
Exactly. That's a really, really good point that you just made. Don't get in the way. It may be that you start partnering up once the contract is signed and then you dive fully in. So you specialize in value-based partnering. So talk to me about how that's different from other approaches to partnering.
So I'll give you an example. I had a prospect who was a referral from somebody who actually knew very little about me, but trusted enough that they would set up this introduction. And I met the prospect for coffee, and we had a conversation about how I might be able to help him set up a partnership deal that he was working on. And his questions to me were something like, what I'm looking for is to hire you so that you can help me get a better deal than my partner. I want you to work on my behalf to make sure that I get the best and that they get sort of the shit under the stick, if I can say that on your podcast.
Okay. Yeah, we don't edit our podcast.
Okay. Well, it's already there. Okay. So the bottom line is that he wanted to have a win-lose relationship. And right away in the beginning of the conversation, I said, I'm sorry, I don't think that I'm the kind of partnership expert that you're looking for because we have a different philosophy. Our philosophy is about helping partners focus on their shared highest priorities for mutual benefit and growth. And those are two core, whether you call them principles or ethical priorities.
Values. Yeah.
We do it based on shared highest priority. So not what your priority is or what my priority is, but where is that shared overlap between what's most meaningful and valuable for both of us. And it's not about my benefit or your benefit, but it has to be mutually beneficial. We both need to get something out of it in the process of working together. So for this client or prospect, there was not a fit. He was looking for something that, was out there. And that was what those were the criteria that he was using to determine who he was going to hire. And I simply said, it's not that this is how we're different. This is our positioning statement. This is our philosophy. And clearly, I think you're looking for something that we don't sell.
Right. Good for you. Sayonara. So, let's talk about kind of walking into a transactional relationship and then positioning yourself more as a long-term business partner. So let's just talk about, it starts with an event, and walk me through what that might look like for you and your business.
So an event, partnerships is a dating game.
Okay.
It's a relationship basis. So you might not know a lot about a client if this is your first event that you're working on together. So you may want to at least see how the event goes. What is it like to work with them? What does it feel like? What kind of demands do they have, or needs or priorities? And how does it feel to be at one of their events? Do you feel like you're a commodity, or do you feel like you're something that's valued and part of a larger conversation? Mm-hmm. At some point, you'll get an intuition or an insight that says, you know what? All of a sudden you start looking at your calendar and you start to think about, I see lots of potential about how I could continue this conversation with this client. So the first step is to feel like maybe I want to move the time horizon just from this one event to thinking about another event or a series of events or a longer relationship. Once you get the insight that there might be at least a value on your side, then you might start to ask from the client's perspective questions. And there's sort of three ways that you sort of position yourself as a longer term potential partner. Mm-hmm. One has to do with the questions that you ask.
Right.
Two has to do with the breadth or depth of the services and products that you offer that fit the needs and priorities of your client. And the third one has to do with time horizon. So not all partnerships have to be long-term, meaning you get married and you're going to be in it forever. Mm-hmm. Partnerships have a beginning and a middle and an end. So the idea is that time horizon just might move from being one event to two events to a relationship that's going to last more than 6 months or a year or 18 months, depending on the type of project that you're working on. But those three insights, or maybe qualities, the questions, the breadth and depth of services, and then time horizon, give you an idea about what will help move you from, and how to position yourself from a sort of that short-term transactional to more of a long-term relational partner.
Love it. Love it. So let's talk about what some of the questions you could be asking the client in the early days that might start to have them seeing a longer time horizon.
One of my favorite questions to start with is, what keeps you or your CEO or executive director awake at night? I want to know, what are the most pressing issues that are top of mind, regardless of whether they're related to the specific event that I might be speaking at, or a product that they're wanting to purchase, or a consulting project. I want to know overall what's chewing up bandwidth. Okay. And for a number of reasons. One, I'm trying to identify a need. But two, I'm also trying to understand what the competing priorities are, because we are always at risk of being cut in the budget for a number of reasons.
Right.
So if I can't make myself one of the most relevant resources to helping that CEO or executive solve their current problem, I'm at risk at being chopped, because I'm not making myself an investment instead of an expense.
Right.
So that's one of the number one questions I ask.
Wonderful.
Another question I ask is, where does this event fit within the annual cycle of your organization? And I'll give you a specific example of a recent prospect who had contacted me about speaking at a professional development day. And I asked this question. It was sort of put through, the committee experience where you meet, gatekeeper number one and try to move your way through the conversation.
Right.
I was with a very senior person on the call, and I asked the question, basically, tell me about the annual cycle of your organization. And it led to the uncovering that they were going through a major change project throughout the entire organization. And it stumped it. She was really, the executive who was on the call was really surprised that I asked the question, because of all the people and the speakers that they'd interviewed, nobody had considered asking how the professional development day fit within the larger context of what was going on in the organization.
Wow.
And that immediately set me apart from my peers who were applying for the same.
And now you're giving all your peers the information. This is what we do in our industry, people.
This is what we do.
We find best practices and we share them with our competition. Yay!
Yay!
Anyway, I think it's great.
It is, and here's why. At the end of the day, my content wasn't a perfect fit for what they were looking for. And the fact that I was even willing to, A, ask them a question that broadened their horizon, 2, let them know that my expertise, given all of the other things they have going on, wouldn't be the best investment for their time. They've already asked to book me a year in advance for a program that they have, because now they want to create an event that fits my expertise.
Perfect. So it's not, and the other beautiful thing about our industry is that then you might actually refer somebody else into that event who was the right fit. So
exactly.
Where does this event fit within the big scope of thing? I think that's wonderful. What's another question that we might ask?
A last question that I would offer is, what is the learning continuum for your organization? So if you are an expert who speaks professionally, you are in the business of education and learning. Even if you're positioning it from a motivational or an inspirational messaging, it's within a learning context. So find out, what is the learning continuum? You're going to learn lots of information about how formal or informal it is, how often they have learning activities, what types of learning activities they have. And that way it sort of gives you almost different check boxes that you can check to see whether or not there's a fit.
Right. And one of the questions that I've talked about in the Wealthy Speaker is, once they've established that this is the problem that you're trying to help solve, or that this is why, if you do ask that question, why me and why now? And they say, well, we wanted you because this and this and this, would be, okay, well, how long do you want this learning to last? Because a lot of times they're just looking to put a Band-Aid on it. Oh, we're just filling a slot in a particular event. But if they say, we really like to do it long term, then that opens up the door for something else in the future. And then you do truly become their partner.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we love the three questions. What are three criteria for successful partnerships of any kind or size?
So one of my sort of contributions that I wanted to offer to humanity. So if we think, looking into the future, if we all brainstorm some of the biggest challenges that we see in our own life, in our own business, in our communities surrounding us, in our countries at large, we quickly realize that we're not going to solve any of those big problems alone. We're going to have to figure out how to work together. Mm-hmm. So my goal was to create a set of criteria, a philosophy, some principles and criteria that would help people, regardless of the type or size or industry of the partnership relationships that they wanted to create. So I really want to preface that what I'm offering to people is something that I think is relevant in any situation when you're talking about partnering, even if it's not a merger and acquisition or a joint venture, but it is a relational connection of working together towards a shared cause. Because otherwise people might dismiss it and say, well, I have no desire to create, a contractual formal partnership, so they don't apply to me, which is not the case. You can use them with your significant other. That's how applicable they are.
Okay.
So criteria number one is, I'll give you the three criteria: shared purpose, better together, and impact on priorities. That's sort of the taglines that we use.
Okay.
Shared purpose means that the partnership must have, or the partners must have, a shared purpose, goal, or vision that they are collectively working towards. And it needs to be as specific as punching in a GPS destination when you're getting in your car and you're going on a road trip. It can't be vague. What I find in most relationships early on is that we think we agree on the destination, but we end up at two different Starbucks that are across the street from each other.
Right.
So the key early on is that you make sure that your shared purpose, the outcome that you're working on, is really super, super clear.
Okay.
In terms of better together, the key here is that what makes a partnership magnetic is the degree to which the partners believe they need each other. So early on, you want to ask the question, based on what your shared purpose is, why does your partner need you? What is the unique offering that you bring to the table that they can't replace or replicate on their own or with somebody else that makes you tremendously valuable? Because the second that you don't have a unique positioning, you become replaceable. Somebody else can provide that same value in a different way or a new way or a more efficient way.
Right.
And the same thing in response when you're evaluating your partner on the other side. What do they offer to you that's extremely valuable? Right. So you want to make sure that there's that unique overlap of why you need each other and that it's really clear early on. Don't make the assumptions about why people need you. Get it out on the table so that becomes part of your regular conversation of the value that you offer to the relationship.
Nice. And number three?
Number three is impact on priorities, which means that the partnership must have a direct impact on one or more of each of the partner's strategic priorities. So if you are a professional speaker or you're a business person, an entrepreneur, and you sit down and you look at your annual plan and, KPIs, your key performance indicators or your objectives, how does every event or every relationship that you're forming, if it's a partnership for sure, help you move closer to your strategic objectives? And in a reflection, when you look at your partner that you're creating a relationship with, how does your relationship impact their strategic priorities? Because strategic priorities get resources. Things that are not relevant to strategic priorities get cut in budget meetings.
Right.
So you want to constantly make sure that your relationship, that partnership, is staying top of mind because it's directly linked to what is top of mind for that individual and their organization.
And it's interesting because I think you probably set those based on your values. Wouldn't you say that having a shared set of values is really, really helpful when, let's say we're talking about any kind of a partnership, not necessarily between a client and a potential speaker for an event, but we're all in relationships with our suppliers, with other speakers who might come in and partner with us on projects. How important do you think shared values are in those relationships?
Shared values are fundamental and important, but I would like to remind our listeners that our priorities are constantly competing and changing. So although we might have, if people look for ethical overlap, that we have ethical principles that we agree on, or values in terms of the way in which we want to do business together, the right and the wrong, those are obvious. Those are important because you're going to tend to seek out people that have similar values and avoid people that have conflicting ones. But what's sort of even more important on a day-to-day basis, once you have that established, is just being mindful about the fact that your priorities change and so do your partners. So if you're going to enter into a longer-term relationship, we talk about building up partnership resiliency, which is your ability to adapt to competing and changing priorities. It means that you have to constantly make yourself relevant to the conversation with your partners because their context is constantly changing. What was top of mind one week is now at the bottom of the list the next week. So if you want to have that longer term relationship, you want those 12-month, 18-month, 3-year contracts, you're going to have to make sure that you brush up on your skills on how you stay constantly relevant because their values might not change, but their priorities will.
I love it. I love it. Way to go deeper on that. So can you give us an example, bringing this back to speaking? Let's say a client who started out for you being a transactional relationship and then it turned into something different. Do you have an example of where, maybe you're even still partners with them today?
Yeah, there's one that comes top of mind. I've been working with them now for more than 5.5 years. It started out as a referral, with actually just to help design a retreat. There was a group of senior executives that were coming together, and through referral, somebody said, could you help my client just design what the retreat was? In terms of, exercises and flow. So I had an initial conversation with the COO, and through my questions, right, and understanding my variety of my services and potential time horizon, found out that the COO didn't actually want to facilitate the meeting for himself. He, although, yes, he could hire somebody to design it, but he didn't actually love the idea of facilitating, and he liked better the idea of hiring somebody to come in and do that. So that was sort of an initial moving from transactional, just design it, to actually, could you come and facilitate the event?
Nice.
At the event, I offered an added value, which just said, I'm going to be here, for the time of the meeting. I'll be available during lunch or breakfast or dinner if people want to sign up to have a private conversation with me about something that's going on in their organization that they feel they can't talk with somebody else, but they'd like to have a private conversation because they were all senior level executives and it was a big corporation. So my calendar filled up well in advance. I had, my dance card was full, so to speak. And through that, at the end of the conference or at the end of the meeting, the COO said, you know what? She's phenomenal. I would encourage you guys to hire her as a coach.
Wow.
And on and on. And so I've done everything from speaking, facilitating, coaching, consulting in terms of all of those different types of services that you might offer. And I've been doing that in multiple divisions across and then deep in a relatively large organization for more than 5.5 years, simply by asking the question, how else can I help? What else is going on? What keeps you up at night?
Wow. Wow. And that, wealthy speaker listeners, is exactly why we had this conversation today on this topic. Wow. You really have, I'm hoping, allowed people to be looking at themselves a little bit differently in terms of their role in the event and what they might be able to do with people from there moving forward. So if people wanted to get in touch with you, what do you think would be the best first step?
Best first step, well, I have an open door policy, so send me an email. If you'd like to have a conversation, we're welcome to send me. It goes right to my inbox. There's no gatekeeper. I can filter out relatively quickly as long as people position that it's, shared high value and a mutual benefit, then I'm happy to have a conversation.
Okay, great. What's your email address?
It's Enette at level8leadership.com.
Level8leadership.com. ENETTE at level8leadership.com. Well, I love that you have given us so much food for thought, and I really hope that people will take this and utilize it and enrich their relationships with their clients. So thank you so much for being on the call with us today, Enette. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jane, and thank you to all of those who are listening.
Well, wealthy speakers, thank you for being here. And with that, we will say we'll see you soon. Bye for now, everyone.